we have this great, very relevant documentary to screen. Punchline for Harold Washington is more than the story of Chicago's first black mayor. It's also a timeless story about the nexus between race and politics in the American city. It is incredibly prescient for the moment that we're in, which is what we'll talk about afterwards, because we'll screen the film and then we'll hold a live recording of our How to Really Run a City podcast. Everyone get your popcorn. If you love cities in all their messiness, and if you love tales about how one man can inspire a movement, you're gonna love Punchline for Harold Washington. So let's go to the movies. What'd you think? Woo! I want to begin by thanking Joe Winston for this terrific film. Really, let's hear it for Joe. This guy's made some other great films: Citizen Coke, about the Koch brothers, What's the Matter with Kansas? But when I saw this, I immediately said, I want to share this with our community and with our mayors. So thank you, Joe. And let's begin with, let me just ask, what's the matter? You okay?
No, we had the lights down for you. Are we keeping them down on purpose, or
I don't know.
just want to shine the light in our face, or?
Well, why, you feel like you're being interrogated?
No one's ever interrogated me, but.
No, actually, that's right. You do the interrogation.
I do the interrogating, yeah. No, I just wondered. Yeah, it's fine.
Corey, see if we can dim the lights. You know, when you get older.
No, not those lights.
Here, a little.
Bring them up so we can.
Oh, you want to see the folks?
I thought I'd like people. I'd like to see. So I just wondered. I mean, I know they're down for the film, but yeah.
Great point. Let's see if we can see the audience, because I want to get to the audience tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's begin with why you made this film. Where did this come from?
Hi, thank you, and thank you everybody for having me here tonight. It's great to be here in Philadelphia to show this film. So briefly, of course, I'm Joe Winston. I produced and directed the film along with the very able team that you saw credited at the end. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, and I grew up in the same neighborhood called Hyde Park, where Harold Washington lived when he was first elected mayor. And parents of classmates of mine went to work in his administration, and it was just this amazing time to be in Chicago, even as a very naive 15-year-old. I didn't understand, backroom dealings of ward politics, but I understood what before it's too late meant. And years later, when Obama became president, and there was this inevitable white backlash to his presidency, I felt like I saw it coming, like I'd already read that book before. But people around me were flabbergasted and appalled and surprised and befuddled and just weren't expecting it. And that moment made me feel that the story of Harold Washington was more than just a political story of a particular election or even a particular city, but a real Rosetta Stone, kind of like a fairy tale or a parable we tell around the campfire about how America really works. And so we've had the benefit of showing the film in screenings like this across the country, and the response is, everybody's got their own local concerns, but I think that we found that the story of Harold Washington does sort of hit a universal chord. Because of what was going on in Chicago at the time, when you dig deep, really this is the country that we all live in. And so that's why I wanted to make a film.
Thank you.
Mareed, I felt your emotion sitting next to you. What was your reaction to the film?
In life, you never know as you schedule your day when God is going to give you what you need. And that's really what I felt. I felt that my visit here today was just a part of my schedule. I was looking forward to it. I've been here before. I enjoy it. But then events become something else. And you go someplace thinking that you're going to give, and then somebody gives to you.
Receive.
So one of the things that I remember about Harold Washington was that after he died, his heart was 2 times the size of a normal heart. because of how damaged it was because of the stress and strain
Yeah.
of being a mayor and becoming mayor the way he did.
Yeah.
And so all of that was just rushing through me.
Yeah.
Because I'm from Atlanta, and we had a mayor named Mayor Maynard Jackson,
Yep.
who went through so many of the kind of difficulties and challenges that Mayor Washington did, except he did it in '73.
Yeah.
And the ad against Mayor Jackson was that the city of Atlanta was a city too young to die.
Damn.
So all of that was just rushing through me, and he died of a massive heart attack at the age of 65 in an airport.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started thinking about the pressure that comes with the job of being mayor, and what a phenomenal job Joe had done kind of conveying it in a manner that was worthy of the man.
Yeah.
So I'm deeply grateful to you.
Well, thank you so much.
Wow.
Mayor.
So, good evening, everyone. So I knew I would be late coming here, so Larry was kind enough. Joe, thank you. So I watched the film a little earlier today on an airplane.
We thought you'd be just calling in from your car, the way you do on the podcast.
That's my usual thing. I think generally that's I'm just going to do it from the car from now on. But so I was in Miami earlier today on a panel, and then Corey, who I drove crazy today because Corey Moscow sent me a note saying,
Our events director.
What time are you coming? And I said, well, is there something going on today? Basically, she was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So, it's just my humor. Anyway, and then she said, did you watch the trailer? And I just didn't respond. I acted like I was already in flight, because that's what mayors do, because I hadn't watched it. But through the wonders of technology, I watched it on the flight back from Miami.
By the way,
I needed to be here tonight.
She showed me the text messages.
Yeah.
It went on, and you were like, are you talking, what are we watching, the Eagles game?
Right. By that time, I was on Wi-Fi on American. I was actually in flight, and I was still fucking with her. And then I'm going back to Florida tomorrow, but I had to be here tonight. There were so many moments, actually, where I wanted to cry. Because what you don't know, Joe, is that year was actually basically the start of my political life. I worked on the late Councilman John Anderson's campaign in 1983 when W. Wilson Goode, because Philly and Chicago were on the same election cycle. Your primary is in February, our primary is in May. So while this was going on in Chicago, Wilson Goode was running for mayor in the Democratic primary against Frank Rizzo. Does anybody, can I get some, what do you young people do? What do y'all, snap? Right? So this is playing out in Chicago. And we're literally, no pun intended, we're basically, no disrespect to anybody, we're basically doing good versus evil in the Democratic primary in Philadelphia at the same time. And I'm working on my first political campaign for Councilman Anderson. And so there was a lot of additional context as I'm watching this film, thinking about Harold Washington, who I never met, unfortunately, but also this other drama is playing out in Philadelphia at the same time. One of the best moments, though, I have to say, there was the part in the film where where they called the election board and said, what do we do? Everyone has voted. I was like, what the fuck? Right? I like, everybody voted? Right? Like, do we close? Do we just, end the day? Or, like, what do you mean everybody voted? Right? There's no one left. Right? So it's just, I mean, this is, I mean, not to call anybody out, but of course I will. I mean, you know, I don't know, run through the whole list. Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Apple TV, Peacock, somebody. This is a national film. I mean, this is a treasure of politics. Philly and Chicago are, you know, very much alike in certain ways. But I mean, what a story. Thank you.
Thank you. Tell your friends at Comcast about it.
Oh, that was good, Joe.
Aren't they,
Yeah,
right there?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I invited Brett. But
You're getting a note. Yeah. I think we need to move on, apparently, or something.
let me just ask Dr. Taylor to give us your bigger perspective on this as a non-elected official, but as a former longtime resident of Chicago. What were you feeling through this film, and how does it resonate for us today?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to come talk and watch the film. That was fantastic. I lived in Chicago for 15 years, so probably longer than I've lived anywhere else. And I also, my work in Chicago when I was there involved housing. I was an organizer, went to court with tenants to circumvent their evictions. And I ended up, racism and segregation in Chicago was one of the reasons why I went back to school and eventually got my PhD at Northwestern. So I'm actually teaching a class now. I'm on the faculty at Princeton University. I'm teaching a class now on the history of race and housing in the United States. And most of the class is about Chicago. So this was very, very familiar. I lived in Chicago when Richard M. Daley was mayor, a terrible mayor, who did terrible things in the city that the city has yet to recover from. And so you see what the promise was and what was lost, and what kind of coalitions can be organized when people believe that something different is possible, and when you have an elected official who's invested in that. It can change the fate of the city. And without that, it can change for the worse very quickly. So it's a fantastic film. I will be showing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is this moment we're in now, with Matt fucking Gaetz as our prospective Attorney General.
Well, he's been nominated. He's not the Attorney General.
I know, but I would not be surprised if you know.
He resigned his job today.
Yeah. So
Yeah, because he's going to get his ass kicked tomorrow.
Yes.
I mean, let's not.
But all of you and mayors, this is your show, so jump in and ask questions of each other and so forth. But I do want to connect this to today, this moment we're in, because I felt when I saw it, I felt this is exactly what we need, and it relates to something Mayor Reed said when we talked a few days after the election, which was you can't nice your way to victory.
No.
And this guy, who I knew very little about before the film, what guts. Like, I can't believe he didn't compromise.
Yeah,
Discuss.
that's true.
You know, I think that the big takeaway from the piece is that fairer is harder.
I'm sorry?
The what?
Fair is harder.
Fair is hard.
So if you want a big, bold, inclusive form of politics that is fairer, it's harder.
Right.
if we're all aligned and we're on one side and we know what we believe and we're ready to fight, then we're just fighting and all of us got to show up. But the weaving of a tapestry, the way that Harold Ford, look at the toll that it took on him. What I thought was so powerful was just you could see him aging.
Mayor, say that
and
one
it
more
was
time.
only
Mayor, Harold Ford, Harold Washington.
Harold Washington, I'm sorry.
Telling story.
You could see him aging right in front of you.
Yeah.
So you know that while he's smiling and laughing and eating and joking and all of the rest, you could see the toll that it was taking on him.
Right.
So that gets to kind of our second point for the political part. One, having a broad coalition, if we're going to do it that way and win that way, is harder. But you've got to be as aggressive as people who many of us view as folks on the wrong side are to win. And then the other thing is the woman or the man. Nobody else could have did what that guy did. He was the one.
Right.
And so as we recover and think about our politics in the future, we've got to be more focused on thinking of the woman or the man who's going to be our champion. Because at the end of the day, winning politicians are our avatar. We see something in them that makes us want to be for them. And 10 million less folks went and voted on the Democrat side of the queue. And if the same amount of Democrats had gone and voted last time,
Right.
we wouldn't be sitting here. So I want to take away the emotional part, but I think that there are three really key points here that we got to start talking about more, because Democrats really aren't grappling with how hard it is to maintain the coalition and it deliver a win that goes towards policies that are policies like Mayor Nutter implemented when you were in office.
If I could jump in, though, I'm curious what you guys as elected officials think about the savior problem. You know, the relying on one great man or one great woman to lead us,
Right.
which is a big problem in Harold Washington's story, that he had no successor. And Barack Obama didn't really have a successor. That seems like that's a problem in leadership. It's a weakness if you depend too much on a single figure. What do you guys think about that?
You know, that's there's a bit of an internal conundrum about that. There's a reluctance to often we have an internal reluctance to try to put our thumb on the scale. But the voters do have a right to try to figure it out, and you kind of step back, and that when you're term limited, you know, your last full year is the election year. You know, if you get 2 terms, right? You know you got to go, and then there are other political considerations. You know a lot of people. Do you want to really get involved, or you just say, hey, the voters can figure it out. There's 5, 6, 7 people running. Let me just do my job and stand to the side. So, you know, I mean, it's not. Is it for you to try to overwhelm the public with your own choice? Because what is that about? Is that ego? Is that what's in the best interest of the city? You want to respect the voters, and they'll make their choice. Thomas Jefferson said, you elect the government you deserve.
That's a tough thing to think right now.
Yeah.
Well, we got our ass kicked, if you're a Democrat, and we have to, you know, I've been through the 7 stages of grief, so, you know, I'm at, unfortunately, acceptance. I mean, somebody wins the Electoral College, which is really the only thing that matters. It's the only election anywhere in the United States of America where if you get more votes than the other person, you might actually not win. It's exciting, it's ego satisfying to win the popular vote, but if you don't win the Electoral College, you go home. and somebody else wins. And so it is what it is when we are where we are. The question now is what are we going to do with it?
Let's get to that. And Dr. Taylor, back in August, you wrote a piece in the New Yorker and a follow-up later, and I understand a new one's coming out. The piece was Kamala's Gamble, and you really, I'm not going to say predicted, but you raised a lot of substantive questions about where the campaign was. Can you summarize your argument for us?
Sure. I thought that the piece that I wrote in August was after the Democratic National Convention, and really it was about a couple of things. One is that the tone, the theme of joy seemed to be a misunderstanding of the actual political mood in the country that I think Harris's people mistook relief that Biden was no longer running and that there was a viable candidate in his place, mistook that for joy or for optimism, and you know, we're going to be the sunny optimists versus the kind of dour darkness that had been profiled at the RNC. And I think that this miscalculation kind of filtered through the campaign, and part of it was because Harris was an incumbent, whether she wanted to be or not. Right. And part of the message that Biden had been running on was that the economy's good, we fixed it, and we need to go from there. But the problem is, and by all conventional measures, the economy is good. Right. Unemployment is at a historic low. Rates of poverty are very low. For Black people, rates of poverty are historically low. But also a miscalculation was that inflation, the rate of inflation, dropped to what it typically is, which is around 2.1%. But a falling rate of inflation is not the same as falling prices. Right. It just means the rate at which prices are rising has slowed down. And so people were really left with the sticker shock of the price hikes over the last couple of years. Right. And in addition to that, we are, despite the conventional measures of the economy, we are on the verge of a historic high number of people who are unhoused and homeless, coming off a year of a historic high. We have housing, the cost of housing is 20% higher today than it was 4 years ago. The number of people who are food insecure is 13% higher than it was last year. And all of it is being held together by unbelievable levels of personal debt. In the first quarter of this year, of 2024, Americans topped $17 trillion in personal debt. And so this is unsustainable. And this is the insecurity, anxiety that, you know, millions of people, ordinary people in this country, are struggling with. And I think that the messaging of joy and optimism, the leaning in, you know, I live here in Philadelphia, rolling in the celebrities the last couple of weekends before the election, as if that has anything to do with what your actual policy platform is, what you are actually able to deliver, I think really depressed the turnout in terms of were people actually motivated to go vote? Did you feel like your vote would actually matter? And I think that is a bigger question that the Democratic Party will have to deal with in terms of who is the Democratic Party? Is it the party parading Liz Cheney around the Midwest, taking Liz Cheney to Michigan to close the election? Is it the party that, you go to Texas to announce that Beyonce is endorsing your campaign? I think these were parts of the issue. And then you had just the last thing I'll say is that you had the campaign of 2020 to look at as a contrast, where because of the protest on the streets, because of the intense pressure, the protests in 2020, according to the New York Times, were the largest in American history, that the Democrats were either forced or more open to basically running a populist campaign, making promises about paid family leave, making promises about childcare, making promises about free college, making promises about housing. And they won with more votes than any candidate has ever won in American history. Right. And so someone made a decision that wasn't good enough, and that we are going to actually pivot away from that towards capturing Republican voters, a strategy that never wins. Republicans voted for Republicans, Democrats voted for Democrats, and they split the independents. The Democrats' problem was that their people didn't come out. In the city of Chicago, 475,000 fewer voters for Harris than Biden captured in 2020. In New York City, 543,000 voters fewer for Harris than Biden captured in 2020. In 36 of 47 states, Harris had fewer voters than Biden. In every major urban county in the United States, she lost 2 million votes. They lost the gamble.
And some of them were switches, right? People switching to Trump, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the stuff about black men, I think it's an important, the majority of black men voted for Harris. Obviously, the majority of black women voted for Harris.
More.
I do think it is something to talk about, and not in the acrimonious way that it is talked about. In the piece that I have coming early next week, the rates of suicide is now the second leading cause of death of black men, age 15 to 24. A 58% increase from 2011 to 2022. From 2000 to 2022, a 37% increase for Latino men. And so when Barack Obama gets up and just dismisses all of it as, you're just sexist, I mean, this is a problem that the party has. At some point, you actually have to engage with what people are either telling you or demonstrating to you about what is happening to their lives. And I felt like the campaign really missed an opportunity to do that, to focus on trying to capture other voters.
Mayor Reed, we had a little conversation on Saturday,
We did.
and I think you really captured a lot of it when you walk people through. Could you give folks a little preview?
I mean, going back, huge plug for how to really run a city. We had a conversation on Saturday, but I think the future Democrats is to beat a woman, you got to beat the woman. To beat a man, you got to beat the man. All of this soft stuff, let folks get out and compete. And I think that Biden got 81 million votes because Joe Biden beat everybody. And he beat everybody in front of everybody. And there is a reptilian aspect to politics, right? I mean, I watched Jurassic Park. There is an aspect to politics that we all sit back and watch, and then we go, that's the person who I believe would get my TV back. Because if somebody broke in my house and stole my TV, I don't want to call the insurance company. I want the person who wants to get my TV back. Because I want my, right? And so I think as we go through this period of mourning, going to your point of what's the future of politics, if you saw Harold Washington, right, as warm and as nice as he is, how brutal a man did he have to be to live through that? The other point is we talk about the election results. The second biggest constituency for the vice president were Jewish people, right? People that understand how it can go. So I think for Democrats, we just need to be competition. And I believe that the vice president, the position that she was placed in, made it really hard because we like to see people earn it. Because here's the real deal, ladies and gentlemen. We go through it for a year and we're kings for 4 or 3. That's the deal. So when you're sitting with the consultants and you wondering how you're getting up at 6 in the morning and knocking on 400 doors and having people leave you in the lobby and you never meet them until you get elected, and then you go and say, man, you sound just like your voicemail, because they wouldn't pick up the phone when you were calling them before you were mayor.
I love that.
Voters make the people humble themselves and drag you through this process.
Right. You got to earn it.
And in exchange, you get to determine how their resources are distributed. You call that shot. And not having to go through that process makes you fall back because you don't feel that connectivity that I earned it from you. And Democrats are going to have to get out. Trump dominates the Republican Party because he's a velociraptor. He's an apex predator, and they love that type of stuff. But to beat that guy, you're going to have a woman or a man that's into that. But they're just in it for the good part, for the good folks.
Right.
Because the good side has to have a velociraptor too. If you go back and you look at Bill Clinton, an animal, Barack Obama, as nice as he does, as he appears, and as much as he smiles, he is unbelievably competitive.
Gangster.
Unbelievably. Right?
Yeah.
So when you look at Biden, when he was running, he was unbelievable.
I'm curious what you guys think about the need to raise money. One of the things that didn't make it into the film, as one of Harold's early press secretaries told me, is that he never had to go to a single fundraiser.
He never what?
He never attended a single fundraiser in his successful campaign for mayor, his first
Really?
one. His first one.
How did that happen?
Because these grassroots groups raised
Yeah.
enough money.
Right.
It was the most expensive, the 1983 mayor's race in Chicago was the most expensive municipal election in American history up to that point. But Harold did not have to go to any fundraisers because all these community groups have been working for decades, raised it for him. So his energies
Joe,
were
did he-
100% dedicated towards campaigning.
I understand if you're saying he didn't go to any fundraisers, but he must have done what these guys have explained to me as call time, right? Spend hours on the phone raising money, or no?
I mean, you know, this guy, he's not living anymore. He's a colorful character, the guy who told me this, Harold's first press secretary. But that's what he said, was that Harold never had to spend any time raising money. Perhaps he's exaggerating, but he certainly had an advantage in that he had an infrastructure that was very unusual, right? I mean, remember, he wouldn't even agree to run at all
Right, he had
until
the three
a certain amount of
conditions.
money had been
Right.
raised.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that
Anyway, I
wasn't-
was just curious,
that
as we
wasn't a
know,
whole
it's a
lot of-
scourge
that wasn't a whole lot
Hey,
of-
Joe, I'm a weirdo. If I hear a politician that complains about having to raise money, I don't speak to him. Get out of my face.
Right. No, it's part of the job.
Either you're going to do the whole thing or don't do it.
Right.
Everybody knows what it is.
Right.
And we get these people that whine. They shouldn't have the power if you're not willing to do the thing. And that doesn't mean that you have to raise, but there's a part of getting elected, and when you're looking at us, you want to see us do as many things well
Right.
as possible.
Yeah.
But
Because,
there's
you know,
also the bigger political issue, and I don't know if this is what you're referring to, of the way that money is distorting our politics. I mean, Elon Musk has essentially bought himself a position
A job.
in this yet to be defined
Right.
cabinet from the people who are trying to destroy federal agencies while creating a new federal agency. But he's basically used $175 million to try to swing the vote in Pennsylvania, and uses his money to influence this administration to buy a job. And so there's a bigger issue.
Well, that's
a
with a
political
person
issue
who
with the
is
role of money.
susceptible to praise. I mean, that's the
It's
the
a
issue with
particularly egregious
Donald
quid pro
Trump.
quo, right?
Yeah.
But when other Democratic politicians have to raise their money from lawyers and consultants, and perhaps might it be that that will influence what information you get, and I mean, you guys know what I'm talking
Joe,
about.
I do not support Citizens United and what has become of it,
Right.
but I also believe that your job is to work to get into a position of power to tame it.
Right.
So when Barack Obama was running against McCain, he of course had been against campaign limits until he realized how much, and because of how important he thought that election was, he was like, well, these are the rules that I'm in.
Sure.
Right.
And
I mean, you can't do the job unless you have the job. And if that's the environment, then, I mean, you know, you got to deal with reality.
And just a plug for tomorrow's programming, we're having, on the topic of Citizens United, Jeff Clements and the actor and activist Deborah Winger tomorrow to talk about their work, which is passed in 22 states so far, for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. And that'll be one of the presentations tomorrow. But Roxanne, why don't you, Roxanne Patel Shepelavi, everyone?
Yeah, there you go.
Hey.
Deborah Winger.
Because we want to hear from you guys too, and you can talk, ask a question. No filibustering. This is not the Senate, but you can ask a question of any of our panelists here.
Anybody have questions?
I've been to a million of these events. It's not possible that Philadelphia citizen audience doesn't have a question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know better.
I know this is a can of worms. I appreciate people being
Say who
here.
you are. What's your name?
My name is Stephen. I'm in the Philadelphia area. I'm just an ordinary working person. But I don't know what we can do locally or nationally in the next 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. What do we do to try to make things better when clearly, at least in my opinion, what's going to go in Washington will make things a whole lot worse for everybody worldwide. But I don't know what if you have any suggestions or ideas, let me know.
Okay. So, I mean, I think a couple things. Look, as I said, I seriously, I mean, I didn't like memorize them, but I knew like a couple of the, 7 stages of grief. I actually started at anger, which is the number 3. And I was like really, really pissed off last week, and then like you come to the reality of it. So here's the deal. Cities at a certain level, I mean, I understand and believe in federalism, but I'd explain it to you this way. I said this morning at the panel I was on in Miami. So I've lived in Winfield for 47 years. I moved there in 1977 when I was going into my junior year at Penn. My trash day has been Monday for 47 years. Frank Rizzo was mayor when I moved to Winfield. And in all that time, through all of those presidents, through all of those mayors, it's been the same. The day after the election on Wednesday, I assume that people's trash got picked up. And it probably got picked up this week too. Cities will run because we do what we do. They will become that much more important after January 20th, 2025. They are fundamentally autonomous. There is federalism. Federal government, I mean, most of you probably did not call anybody in the federal government today. Right? I have a one-way relationship with the federal government. I send them tax dollars, and one day I'll collect Social Security. Other than that, I have very little interaction with the federal government. They do send a lot of money to cities. And so my recommendation for all the mayors, not speaking specifically about Philadelphia, is reanalyze every federal resource that has come or is coming to this city. All the stuff that the Biden-Harris administration sent us, the half a dozen bills with all the letters of the alphabet, what do you have, what's coming? The next crew pretty much can't do anything about it. And figure out how you're going to spend those resources. You'll get through 2026. Midterms, we'll see what happens. Cities will still run, and they will become the beacons of light across the United States of America. We do what we do because it's what we do. Keep your heads up. We've been through worse in the United States of America over the last 400 plus years. We'll get through this too.
Great answer.
All the way over in the corner. Oh, or right there.
I had a question, but mine is a little bit depressing to follow.
Okay.
To follow that uplifting note, so maybe
All
the
right.
other person.
Yeah.
Say your name.
Oh, all right, never mind. I'll bring it down for us. My name's Emily Rothenberg. I am a native Chicagoan who's been in Philly for 2 years and
Welcome.
met Larry 2 years ago, almost today, at the festival. I was thinking as I was watching this and listening to you guys that about my first two thoughts within like maybe 1.5 seconds of seeing the news 2 Wednesdays ago. And my first thought was that I shed a literal tear for democracy at large as a value, as a social contract that we've held here. And my second thought was, wow, I really didn't realize or understand that more than half of the population would prefer to be lied to. And I thought, you know, I don't think anyone who was an honest and true public servant could have stepped up and won this election, because it seemed to me like what won was the sense of comfort that people get from someone who is willing to come in as a demagogue and promise completely insane and undeliverable things and use bigotry and scapegoating. So I guess to former Mayor Reed's point, in terms of like how are people as characters appealing to us as politicians, I'm feeling very depressed and low about, you know, well, what is it, like if the Democrats have become a party that stands for people who actually want to do work and hold policy that does things for the average person, how do you sell that to a populace that seems to primarily want an undeliverable promise?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I don't think people are attracted to Trump for his robust policy platform.
What would that be?
But I do think it's a little, the idea that the Republicans lie, which they clearly do, but somehow the Democrats are the honorable, noble party. I think whether it's not construed as a lie, it's construed as an unfulfilled promise. And so if you ask an ordinary voter who will deliver the goods, I think people have a hard time coming up with anyone. And that part of the malaise is that there's continuity of conditions in people's lives from one administration to the next. And there's one party is boorish and ridiculous and cartoonish in its bigotry and hatred. And the Democrats aren't doing that. But there's something, if you're old enough and you remember the Iraq War, and that Barack Obama won because he was opposed to the Iraq War. And who was the architect of the Iraq War? Dick Cheney. And so to then see Kamala Harris not just accept the endorsement of Liz Cheney, who has never seen a war she did not want to send someone else's child to go fight in, parade her endorsement, but then unsolicited says, "And thank your father for his service to the nation." Wow. And so that's not the big, gross, disgusting, racist lies that Donald Trump tells. But if you're of a certain age, it might rub you the wrong way. We might ask the question of, why are Latinos voting for this venal racist who's promising on day one to deport people, migrants, immigrants? Then we might have to recall, under different circumstances, not the same rhetoric, but who deported more people? Who did Latino activists in 2012 call the deporter-in-chief? Barack Obama. And so this isn't about if you like it or you don't like it. It's about understanding the perspective of voters who feel like, what is the choice? The venal, vicious, racist liars? Or the people who smile in your face, tell you what you want to hear? Sometimes they believe it, sometimes they don't. But often, if you look at the continuity of your and your family's life over a period of time, from one administration to the next, it looks very similar. Might not look the same, but it looks very similar. And those are the choices that we have in these elections. And it might tell you something about why there is what pundits describe as an enthusiasm gap.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I might be in the minority in the room. I think that brush puts Democrats and Republicans too close for what actually happens when one is governing. I mean, factually, you're right about Barack Obama and deportation, but the same Barack Obama is the reason 50 million people have health care. 26-year-olds can, still be on their parents' insurance. There's a reason why people can get insulin for $35. So especially black people, the Latinos and others who would choose in between medicine and food, those are Democrats. Poverty is reduced more. So, I think we can go line by line on what happened to people in their real lives. Democrats created 50 million jobs, Republicans created 1 million. So this blur, I can't tell between, I don't really buy that. I think there are things called bad campaigns that don't have a process that attracts people. And I believe that when you get out and are able to watch people fight for and compete for your vote, you're more wedded to the ultimate result in the election. And I think that had a huge impact in the difference between the 80 million people voting and 70 million people voting. But I, as somebody that's given an awful lot of my life to public policy, am not going to do the Democrat-Republicans kind of close, because it's not even close. What Republicans did from a policy standpoint were pass massive tax cuts that have put the country on a fiscal path that's unsustainable. And every single time you have these fiscal catastrophes, Democrats come in and fix it.
Clean it up.
Joe Biden is getting his head beat in because Donald Trump mismanaged the COVID crisis, and we had to pump a ton of money into the economy so we could all stay home. And as a result, prices shot up. And one of the most decent men ever to serve in public life is getting tossed out of office with a bum's rush when he's delivered the best numbers of any Democrat since LBJ. On wealth, on jobs, on black wealth. So I'm not going to be in a room where people talk about, because I want to really have a debate with Republicans, because I have a reptilian nature about this. And see, that's the Democrats' problem. We nice it too much. We nice it too much. and they get in rooms and they talk crazy and they influence people because we let them talk crazy and we laugh and get in our car and go home. But that person who is the unsophisticated listened to the louder person, and they didn't have somebody else that said, you know what, that's ridiculous. You talk about tax cuts that won't even benefit you.
Right.
Right.
The other part of it is, I mean, we just suck on the message.
I think we fight it. I think we fight it by fighting it. To the young lady who was asking how you feel, I think when you feel like you feel, I go and engage with a politician that I think is really terrific in a direct way. The one thing that's better about politics right now is if you walk up to an elected official that's worth their salt and tell them you want to help, they'll probably let you help them because they need it. Mm. And so you as a person who used to couldn't get close to a state rep or a state city council can actually get close to them and really influence them in a different way. Right. Because it is a fight. But the fight is about getting the 70 million back to 80 million. And you all in meetings like this can help us actually do it. Right. And the fight is we've got to be as loud as they are about bad policy when we do things that were good.
So, Mayor, there's another point here to Emily's, and I think Emily, and it's great to see you, Emily. I'm glad you're here. I think the helplessness or the depression, as you called it, is probably you're not alone, right? And I think that what we saw in the film, a movement. We saw in the film not just a charismatic leader, right, but an army of citizens who were intent on making change. Right. And Mayor Nutter, you mentioned Rizzo. I'm old enough, like you, because we're old heads, to remember Frank Rizzo. Frank Rizzo was very Trump-like. It was Trump before Trump, right? And a really interesting coalition gathered in Philadelphia. Right. You were probably part of it, or Anderson was, I guess.
I was adjacent.
And he tried to override the city charter.
Yep.
And this coalition,
1979.
And this coalition rose up and kicked him out of office.
Well, that was
citizen engagement.
Yep, absolutely. And it was out of 79. And I'm sure there are a number of people in this audience who remember, out of 79, Hardy Williams runs in 71, Charlie Bowser runs in 79. Subsequently, it's interesting that the film talks about a deal. There was a deal, and the agreement to support Mayor Green, candidate Bill Green, in 79 was that he would appoint an African American as managing director. That person ended up being Wilson Goode. 3 years later, a day or two after the general election in 1982, Mayor Green decides and announces publicly that he's not running for re-election. And 2 days later, Wilson Goode, as the managing director, announced that he was running. And so that dynamic sets off a chain of events. That coalition comes together. Bill Gray had become the congressman in 78, ran against Congressman Nix in 76, loses, comes back in 78, wins. And so the 70s into the 80s is this whole story about the rise of African Americans, the Latino community, the progressive community, which at the time was not called progressive, but was the liberals. I'm a longstanding member of ADA. Somehow now I've become, I don't know, a moderate, because everybody moved left, and I didn't. And so, I mean, this arc of these stories, and this is the story of cities all across the United States of America. Tom Bradley in the 70s, up through the 80s into the 90s, Mayor Dinkins in New York. Everyone thinks that he won earlier. He was actually later, first black mayor of New York City. And so all of these stories are built on each other. And I want to say to you, Tom, that
Joe.
there's Joe, rather, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about Tom Bradley. There's just no question in my mind, especially after seeing the film and seeing and remembering many, many things. There's no way in the world that the Chicago election and all that was going on in Chicago, February, March, April, doesn't end up having an impact on what's happening in Philadelphia in a May primary with many of the same issues, circumstances, Wilson Good, Frank Rizzo, the old stuff, the new stuff, the racism, et cetera, et cetera. And that story just continues all through many, many cities across the United States of America. And the end result, or the current result, we elect our first woman mayor, African American, in Philadelphia last year, 40 years after Harold Washington and Wilson Good become the first black mayors of these two cities.
Yeah.
All of these stories go together.
King told us, right, that the arc of the moral universe is long. He forgot to tell us how long. That's the only.
Well, we here, we ain't going nowhere.
And that's. I mean, I do think cities can change because of citizen activism.
Yep.
And I think that that's what tomorrow is going to be about.
The public has to decide. I mean, people have to decide, how much you willing to put up with. At the end of the
15
day.
people can take over a city.
There's not one elected official in the United States of America that put themselves in office.
What do you mean by 15 people can take over a city?
15 hardworking, thoughtful people can shift the direction of a city.
Yep.
They can win a mayoral race. They can become a political bloc. 15 people. I've been involved in 5 mayoral elections, managed 2, ran on my. It's 15 people. When you really, I don't know. It's really 15 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you sit down and say, I want to be mayor.
Right.
The first time is probably 6. 3 of them think you're crazy. But then it grows. And anybody who's been in a political campaign knows that the intensity of a political campaign makes you close to people for life.
Yep.
I don't care what their backgrounds are. Because in that process is so intense. And you get to see people faster and get to know them faster. You see what they would do under pressure. You see how they really feel. You see do they have a temper. Do you see all of these things that you take years.
Yeah.
So anytime people tell me about what they think, that 15 people, get a woman or a guy who you think is special, 15 people. And cities is 600 years. We're way older than countries anyway.
That's really interesting. I want to ask the 2 mayors, and then we'll take one last question, right? But I want to ask the 2 mayors real quick. I'm conditioned to support bipartisanship and deal making. And when I watched Harold Washington not make a deal, I thought, that's terrible. And then I thought, oh my God, that's what we need. Someone who will go to the wall like that. And as leaders, what was your reaction to that?
Well, I assume most of that wasn't even about bipartisanship. I mean, in cities,
well, that's right. It's too
right.
Yeah, right. It wasn't. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that at the time. You know better.
I can add a little bit of color to that too, which is something that did not make the film. Was that Harold Washington and his principal adversary, Fast Eddie Verdoliak, they would meet like after hours at Harold's apartment,
Of course.
and try to negotiate. I mean, the negotiations never went anywhere, but they were talking.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, in most big cities, most of the major cities in the country, I mean, look, 18 people run the city of Philadelphia, 17 members, 17 council members, and the mayor. What do we have? 1 Republican?
Yeah.
No?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. O'Neill.
And
yeah.
2 working family parties. I mean, so it's not.
Well, forget the
local
bipartisan
level.
point.
It's not D's and R's. It's
Right.
politics and personalities. I mean, that's what happens.
I'm just curious about his stubbornness turned out to be a political strength.
He was a reformer.
He's a reformer.
He was a reformer. Yeah.
I mean, I think that he wanted to be mayor. And because of what he had gone through knew he had to beat them. Once you beat people, it's very good. It's easier to be bipartisan. But when you're mayor, they need to know that this is a conversation. And I'm going to win most of the time because I went through the process of becoming mayor. Right. And so there's a part of that's what I felt he was doing. If he had never established that I'll go further than you will, and that I'm as tough on the inside, although I smile a lot, as you will, right? The biggest things gets done when somebody shows who is alpha. And if you have a mayor, because a city is run nonstop. It's nonstop. As soon as your eyes open up, it's decisions.
All day, every day.
All day long. So if you have somebody that does not run it and is not into it, the people can tell and the city falls apart.
Right.
Yeah.
And the best mayors in the country the best people at it are into the details. And in my opinion, he was getting his power. Right. And once you become powerful, it's very easy to be, even-handed.
Once you're in charge.
I mean, I used to tell drug dealers when I would meet them. So when I first got elected, Willie Brown told me, as soon as you get elected, go meet with all the drug dealers. So when he got elected mayor of San Francisco, all of the drug dealers that he knew, he met with, and he said, look, man, I just got elected mayor of San Francisco, the first black mayor in the history of San Francisco. If you're going to murder somebody, you better take it to Oakland. They had a crime but my point is, when I got elected mayor.
What is the point?
That's one kind of bipartisanship.
No, the point I'm making is that there are times when you're in office when you have to convey your authority so you can have a real conversation. And so I developed a rapport in hard parts of my city when people would come and tell me what was going on. Poor policing who were overly aggressive, and we could have a real conversation because I had opened a kind of conversation that they're not used to. But you always had to let them know that when it gets down to it, I'm the one with 2,000 police officers. So don't confuse openness with who is going to determine how many people get killed in the city. And in the city of Atlanta, we had less people murdered year over year than had ever been murdered before, which is my number one job, is to make sure you get home. No mayor has a bigger job than make sure that when you walk out of the house, you get back home. And when people feel that, it allows you to do all of the other good things, in my opinion.
Let's can't have a great city if people don't feel safe.
Yeah, and 60-year low under you.
That's where I learned that from.
Can't hear you.
Got a guy in the back.
Mike, you can hear my voice.
Yeah, go
Wait,
ahead.
I think we do.
There we
There
go.
we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. This is not really a question. This is really more so a comment. I appreciate watching this. I have a group chat that I'm in, and everybody's reacting to the elections. And one thing we always talk about is how do we be able to mobilize and do things internally for a bigger change, because a lot of money came into the city that brought people in together and to network, and a lot of synergy was taking place that way. I'll say this is a funny joke. I'm glad that I'm not gonna get no more text messages or people running up to me talking about we gotta stop Trump that don't look like me. That's the one thing I felt a little disheartening about the campaign. But outside of that, the reason why I stood up is because this is directly for Mayor Nutter.
Yeah.
I run a platform called Philly Goes to College.
Yeah.
And I believe your administration rolled that out. I would love the opportunity to speak with you outside of here. Sure. I know the lights are gonna go low, they're gonna usher you to the back. But I feel very, very passionate about this platform. I stepped into it not knowing what I was doing, not knowing what was going on. I'm a year and a half in, and I keep hearing, this was Mayor Nutter's initiative.
Yeah.
And I'm in a room with you right now, and I'm like, look, I need to connect with him.
I'm gonna be over to you in a few minutes.
Okay.
There's no back.
So that was not ending on a question.
Yeah. No, we're all good.
Let's take
I'll
one.
find you over there.
Then let's take one last question, and then let's mingle, and let's end on a high, inspiring note. but
There
no
we go.
pressure.
We're going to try.
No,
We're
I'm
gonna try.
good. My name's Mike, and I sort of know the filmmaker. Joe, what got left out of the film?
Wow.
I'm sorry, Mike?
What got left out of the film?
Oh, well, everything that's not in the 6-hour director's cut, right? I usually have to field these kind of questions when I show it in Chicago because I'm around people who lived through the history, and they're always telling me about there was this meeting in 1977 of this group and that it didn't get included and that kind of thing. Yeah. So anyway, in the HBO feature film about Harold Washington, we'd love to know more about his childhood and his upbringing, which was pretty interesting. He was one of 8 children, and his father was a precinct captain, a lawyer, and a preacher somehow, who under the Richard J. Daley regime. And so Harold Washington was knocking on doors from 13 years old. Anyway, we'd only get to touch on the film. Our agent at the time was really pressuring us to get it under 100 minutes, which is why it moved so fast. It's 103. That was as short as we could get it. And there's 1,435 separate scenes in 103 minutes. And that was as short as we could get it. Usually films of this nature are not this long, but it was important to me and to my team. It was important for us to go deep. Usually films about mayors end when the candidate is elected. That's the happy ending, right? The music swells, the credits roll, and the movie's over. And it was important to me having the benefit of hindsight also, and of course what happened to Harold Washington, but also the rich storytelling and rich vein that we could profit from to try to ask and answer the question of, well, what happened next? So it was a lot. It was a big bear, and I hope the good folks at Comcast or some other corporate overlords will help us bring it to more people.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
Yes, ma'am. Joy. Yes, I'm sorry. That's the lights.
We need to get it on mic.
Microphone. Yeah. We're really
Last question here.
Really going to try to light it up. Go ahead.
Okay. How do we
The mic went out.
Mic went out. How do we find another Harold Washington?
Where are they? That's a good question.
I think those folks are out there. I think the challenge of, okay, let me be that person. Obviously, I'm a lifelong Democrat and been involved. I think we do not do anywhere near the kind of job we should be doing to cultivate younger folks to get involved in politics and public service. The training, the education, the coming up, through the ranks, and I mean, a lot of that I think has been lost. I mean, I ran for committee person in 1982, lost, ran for committee person in 1984, lost, ran for committee person in 1986, finally won. Became a ward leader, ran for city council in 87, lost, came back in 91. I teach at Columbia. My students ask me about getting involved in public service. I tell them the best thing you could ever do is work on a campaign. A lot of folks now just want to, I just want to run, right? I've got 5,000 people on Instagram, and I tweet every day, and I'm like, yeah, okay, go work on a fucking campaign and actually learn something about this business. And so I mean, I'm old and I guess I'm old school, but like, learn the craft, do the work, and figure out what it is that you actually really want to do. This, seems like, bright lights and, excitement and all that. It's a lot of hard work. And so I want to encourage, and some of us, I mean, obviously I'm off the stage, although I'm on one right now, but like, this is a generational change. And we need to be in a business of encouraging younger people to get involved in this work, be activists, be out there, and there's a bunch of folks that just need to, quietly move out of the way and create opportunity.
Let me also, Mayor, wouldn't you say also, like, no office is too small? The conservatives, they run for school board. They run for these tiny races, right? And liberals seem like we take a nap for 4 years till the next.
We often, again, as Democrats, we are often so focused on, winning the White House or, these bigger offices, and the other party, right, they're doing school boards, they're doing dog catcher, they're doing, counselor of this and the other thing, and the next thing you know, like, who draws the congressional maps? Oh, that's the folks in the State House, right? Who's trying to ban books? Oh, that's the elected school board. Obviously, we don't have an elected school board here, but my point is there are tons of... Every 6 months, somebody somewhere is running for something. And there's never been an office where someone didn't win. I'll leave you with this. You are not technically alive until some elected or appointed official signs your birth certificate. You are not officially dead until some elected or appointed official signs your death certificate. And everywhere in between those 2 points, someone who got elected or then appointed other people are making decisions that affect your life, your kids' lives, and other people's lives every day. So every election actually matters because it affects your life for the rest of your life. Get involved. Stop fucking around. Stay focused.
Stop fucking around. Stay focused. So that might be the headline. I just want to engage that question. How do we find the next Harold Washington? Because Harold Washington wasn't Harold Washington until in retrospect, right? And here in Philadelphia, we have a legendary former mayor, former governor, Ed Rendell. People have forgotten that he was a 3-time loser who the last headlines he made before he ran in '91 was he got kicked out of Veterans Stadium for paying a guy $20 to throw snowballs at the Dallas Cowboys. Ed was kind of seen as a joke, and then he becomes mayor in '91 and goes on to have this. He was DA, but then he lost for mayor twice and governor. He ran for governor also, right? So, and my point, but the point is, he wasn't Ed Rendell until he became Ed Rendell, and which is why I keep coming back to the focus on that we saw tonight, which is why I wanted to share it with everyone, on citizen engagement, a citizen movement. The power, all the questions have been about who can help us, when the answer is ourselves, right? It's the 15 people who can change a city. It's not one, it's 15. I want to thank you guys, and thank you again, Joe, for a terrific film. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you tomorrow, and let's mingle.